You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. But I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I'm too geeky to be preachy, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I got way too many missed calls. Think your girlfriend going through her withdrawals. I do what I wanna, God gave me big balls. And some hoes that wanna cover them with lip gloss. Seen them looking at me crazy, but I ain't go. Hood nigga, ain't too many places I can't go. Tryna fit all of your friends in that Durango. I'm the only young nigga with a Kango. Chain glow, hang low, scary Anglos. In Chapala trading dollars for the pesos. Mama smell the marijuana on my pesos. About to kill them in my nigga where they make those. Case closed, change clothes and time zones. She shook her neck and mind blown. Got the funky shit that make them do the stank face. I ain't chasing hoes, nigga, I'm at Chase Bank. Hey, you in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. But I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out.
There he is.
All right. Welcome everybody to Esoteric Journey. It's good to have everybody here. We've got about 7 people here tonight. Danny is with us. Debbie, as always, lovely to see you. And James York is with us for the first time in a long time. And Matt is back. And the birthday boy, Pi, has joined. And of course, our convalescing host, James True. And we are live streaming on the Dojo Earth Radio.
How dare you?
Good evening to everybody out there listening.
Hey, everybody.
Did you say, how dare you?
Yeah, I did.
I thought I heard that. Yeah.
So we were having an interesting conversation in the green room prior to going on. And James York has joined us tonight, and he was in the dojo last night, which was a good dojo. And I could talk about my own feelings about that dojo and the day that I've had, but I want to kind of turn it over to James because I think he has some interesting insights that could lead to an interesting conversation. But I would like to get to touch on some of the things we talked about in dojo last night in a more esoteric way. So James York, the floor is yours, my friend.
Thank you, Eric. So after last night's dojo, I was trying to have a thought about compassion for the other side, right? If you want to call it that, compassion for the police. And I was thinking, what would it be like to show up when somebody is injured? You don't necessarily know that that person has thoughts of healing themselves or whatnot. So you might have an automatic reaction to think, I better get this person to the hospital. But in the green room, like we were talking, it got a little deeper into the sense that I actually know some cops, and it got into this whole electrical costume of what is it like to be a cop? Because as compassionating police officers, well, I know some. So the story that I was sharing was being in the back seat of one of my friends who is a detective. We were heading up to a brewery, and we're heading up to Treehouse in Massachusetts, and there's a police officer on the side of the road, and he's taking radar. And I say to my friend, "Hey, Mike, you should probably slow down," because I look at his speedo; he's doing like 82. And he laughs. Yeah, right. And then he turns around and says, maybe you're right. And then he speaks to me in confidence and says, "Hey, these Massachusetts officers, they actually play by their own set of rules." And I'm like, "Oh, do tell." He's like, "Yeah, they've been known to actually bust people like us. They treat us just like we're everyone else." And I'm just fascinated that he's telling me this, because he's speaking to me from like an insider perspective, right? Like tell me more about how these police officers treat you like you're a quote normal person. And so I'm looking at the scenario, and here's a guy that has been on the force for like 12, 15 years. And I know he's handed out DUIs. I know he's handed out. And I got his daughter right next to me in the back seat. She's 3 years old. So I'm racking up the tally here. I'm like, okay, you're speeding. You're on your 4th double IPA. You're heading to a brewery. So we got like speeding, risk of injury to a minor, DUI, all the things you've arrested people for. And now you're telling me that I should probably comply because I might get busted by these heretics of the community that I live in, and they would bust me. And then it even got a little deeper. He went on to talk about a police convention that he goes to, and I forget which state it was in. It's called Idaho. And he says, "Yeah, they won't host us anymore." And I says, "Oh, really? Why is that?" And he says, he looks at me like I'm retarded. He says, "Are you kidding me? Can you imagine 5,000 police officers in your town?" And the answer should be, well, that should be the safest town in America for that night. And I asked, I'm like, "Well, why is that a problem?" He's like, 5,000 police officers all in the same town. They end up tearing apart the stadium, running over people's yards, knocking over their mailboxes. And I'm like, wow, that's entirely hypocritical that the safest town in America is now destroyed by a bunch of obnoxious police officers that think they're above the law. So it's just a really cool perspective to be involved in that conversation, to where his guard was actually let down and he was sharing inside information of like, yeah, it's actually the last place you'd want to be, 5,000 police officers in the same town. And it just rings true too, because like I've even been places, like recently I was in Costa Rica and I almost saw no police officers. And you know how safe that place felt? Like, to not be around people that are looking to lock you up at gunpoint, incarcerate you. So I'll kick it off with that. Anyone has thoughts on that or perspectives of their own?
Well, certainly, I mean, it's interesting, right, that he thinks of himself as different than regular people. In a way, so do we, right? We see ourselves as kind of different than, the mass or the normies or whatever, the man bear pigs. But we also recognize that we were man bear pigs at one point in our lives. And so we try to have compassion for these these people. But on the other side, you have this uniform, right, who's now, he's a friend, right? So he's not just the uniform. Like, he's not just some cop that's at your window, license and registration. So, you feel relaxed and comfortable around this person. and they feel the same around you enough to be, driving slightly intoxicated with their 3-year-old in the car as a detective, and telling you things about these cops that it sounds like he knows cops are crazy and wild. But then it's like this brotherhood mentality in a way, not so much different than a secret society or a fraternity. In a way, it's like a mixture of those two things. Yeah, it's very interesting to think about how there's a lot of similarities in a way. The way he sees himself as different, maybe even like he knows things that they don't know, or he feels like he can get away with things that other people can't. That he's entitled to certain privileges because of his brotherhood. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I can totally see it that way. You're right. Like, even inside of like the COVID restrictions and whatnot, when I'm walking around without a mask, like I feel this sense of, this glistening on myself. Like I know something you don't know. So yeah, I think you're hitting the nail on the head there, Eric.
And there were, I remember back in, was it 2020 or 2021? A lot of cops were, well, the whole George Floyd thing happened, and there was a lot of stuff happening with cops at that time. But then, like with the vaccine, it seems like there were cops that were quitting their jobs and refusing to. And I didn't really know how to take those articles. Is this real? But it would seem that there are some cops out there that there's more dimensions to them than maybe the uniform might convey. And yeah, I think trying to have compassion for them is an exercise that's worth going through.
Well, they're flawless by default. They're the first person that you look to for authority in the room, regardless of their energy. They are the expert on every situation or dispute that's happening. They're judge. They're the key to your security. And these are all things that we give them. We don them with this Liberace coat, don't we? When we treat the uniform like we do. And even worse, I think one of the worst things we can do is to try and befriend and humanize cops. Because it's exactly antithetical to what the uniform means. If anything, it should be more of a quarantined kind of approach to these figures because of what we've done to them, because of what we've imbued and given them. That kind of power, that's what's called absolute power. And absolute power corrupts absolutely. It's not about how moral someone is. It's not about how great the system is. You are bequeathing someone as the sole arbiter of violence, of control, of authority, and of punishment. And that will never, ever, ever be okay. That's why Costa Rica feels so good, because James was immersed in a natural setting, right? Now, I'm not trying to say that having cops themselves is unnatural, because look around. We have cops. So this is very much what people do, not what cops do. All of this is 1,000% enforced by people who insist that you bow down to this and that you befriend it even. This is the worst part, is the befriending part. I have people on Twitter that get mad when I talk about our relationship with cops because they're like, man, they're just doing their job. Or, well, my cop's really nice in my hometown. It's like, no. Your cop is letting you kiss his ass and he enjoys it. That's not nice. That's him allowing you to lick his balls, and he's going to look at you and say, yes, you've done well there. You've done well there. And that's in my opinion, that's 100% the fault, or not even to say fault, because I'm not here to say it's a fault, but that is 100% the process given by the people, not by the cop himself. A cop didn't grow up and run through the gauntlet of American Gladiator to ring the bell before anyone else did. So now he gets to run around town and club people because he's the winner. It's literally the person that's able to, hang on a second, back spasming, that's able to like penetrate society and feel comfortable inside that role. So we're creating the sociopath, and I mean that in a clinical way. We're creating the sociopath. We're creating a relationship with the sociopath, and then we're giving him guns, salary, the ability to take property, the ability to seize property and sell it on the market, and use the profits from the sale of that property to do more policing. And so when you look around at that, you have no choice but to be completely enveloped in the idea that we are living in a broken society run by people that are desperately wanting to have this kind of setup. And until people are done with that, or until our relationship to anyone in uniform changes, this will only get worse. And look around. All it's done is gotten worse, right?
Certainly has. And we see, at least the militarization of the police with the vehicles, the weapons, the people that are, coming through the police academy to be cops are people that are coming back from the Middle East, that were in the Army or the Marines. And, we could even talk about soldiers, but we're going to keep it on cops because, I think there was a time where we had peace officers. And I think even then, what you're talking about was happening. It's just the more power we've given them, the more they've taken. And so, we're at that point where the system exists because we've willed it to exist.
Yeah, and
we've given it everything.
And they haven't really taken it. I really think that if you're going to endlessly place donuts, raw meat, money, cash, drugs, cars at the footstep of someone that you've given this Liberace coat to, and if they are to open the door and say, well, okay, I'll take this, I'll bring it inside and do what I want to do with it, they didn't go out and take that power. That was a gift given to them on day one with a default of, look, you're always right, I'm always wrong. And we make up rules saying why we have to do it. We say, well, my roads, or even my 911. But none of those contracts require this kind of relationship with a Liberace, with a gun. None of them. And I remind everyone of the fire department. The fire department is first of all, most of our fire departments are voluntary. Second of all, the authority of the fire department ends the moment the incident's over. So the 911 call doesn't even have to go through the police. The 911 call could be a simple community bulletin. Hey, here's a warrant, here's a wanted poster, here's a problem. Someone is calling for help. If you want to vigilanteize yourself and go respond to this emergency, feel free to do so. And that's exactly how fire departments operate. And believe it or not, fire departments actually choose whether or not to go to a fire. It's their decision to do things like that. And that kind of decision is a different experience when you're living in a voluntary relationship with it. It's not something that becomes your bread and butter. It doesn't become your entire life force or essence as to why you're here and what you're doing on this planet. And there's no way to shed that off. You're not going to take a cold shower. You're not going to be able to remove those feathers. They are forever in you because you've been placed on this drug of infallibility. And that drug has been reinforced every single day. And there's a trauma bond between you and everyone else that's infallible. And I would call it completely moral for any kind of police brutality to simply just be, because this is exactly the system that's actually been built for it.
What you were describing kind of lines up with the idea that you had about the military, the volunteer soldier, that's fully capable of, it's like I wouldn't even call it, he's not like a soldier in the sense that he's joined like an army, but he's just chosen to go and fight on his own. Right. I can't remember where you talked about that, but that reminded me of that the way you were talking about the firemen and how, a model of what like a police force would be, just regular people that want to respond to a call for help.
Well, that is like firemen. Actually, I do know one, and most of his calls are for drug overdose and resuscitation and things like that. So they're pretty well-rounded in terms of how they help people, and they also do fight fires. So
I would say it even extends even deeper than that. Like even anyone who wears a hospital badge right now, like that sense of credential, whether you're a professor or a nurse, like you have this sense of credential to where even to speak to them, you're not even talking to a person anymore, but you're talking to a badge. And that's where the blockade happens right there.
Yeah. What gets me is that even my kind of questions or scrutiny of this is considered wrong. Like, well, you don't know what it's like, or you're mean, or you don't respect the cop enough. And I think I'm one of the few people in the room that's actually trying to respect the cop, because I know I just look at the position. I look at exactly what's being bequeathed, and I'm like, how do you come back from that? How do you return to a normal citizen after doing that kind of duty even? How does that even work? Every single bit of you, there's a car parked in your driveway that has lights on it. You are completely immune from all traffic violations. You are completely immune from any kind of trespassing clause. You are legally immune from even damaging or hurting anyone, because there's a giant insurance policy behind you, which means that you are infallible. And that's not a healthy way to treat anyone. It would be no different than saying my child is flawless, and if he does anything wrong, well, he didn't do anything wrong. The problem's you, not him. And if you would change your attitude about him, then maybe you would understand. Instead of having this other approach, which is more like treating the police officer himself or herself as a victim, as someone who is giving up something, and that something that is going to be given up is only going to be able to last maybe 3 years max. Like maybe that's about the most you could get away with giving someone this kind of authority. And that after that, it would be very imperative to retire this person, to get them as far away from this kind of work as possible so that they can return to the normalcy of living in a society where we are all responsible for our own behavior, instead of being bequeathed with all the magic Liberace stuff you need to just continue on doing whatever. There's zero motivation to reflect, to grow, and to even better the society around you. I don't think that's possible to better the society around you when you're looking at it as, look at all these man-bear pigs. Look at what they want me to do. Look at they want me to solve all their problems, even the ones as silly as, she took my rent money, so I fucking beat her, or that dude took my drugs, or all of the litany of things that come in the realm of what cops get called out for. There's only so much someone like that can take. There's only so much fame they can be anointed in before we're starting to break that person as an individual. And why are we as a society abandoning the very people that we're claiming to respect so much, that we're giving them a carte blanche ability to basically do whatever they want?
it's kind of like what you say, James, about thank you for your service.
Yeah, exactly.
That same, yeah.
Exactly.
It just seems to like the king's men in times of past, when there's you have the king's, the royal guard, and they have certain privileges, or any mercenary force, that's always granted certain societal privileges, and it's just more diffused and mixed up in modern society, I think, but sure seems to resemble like aspects of mercenary forces and king's men.
Yep.
And
piracy, right? Like
yeah,
civilized piracy, right? Civilized, tailored, well-dressed piracy.
exactly. Yeah.
Corporate piracy, actually, because almost every police precinct, police station, whatever, is a corporation. And they are, I think, listed on Dun and Bradstreet.
Wow.
These municipalities are, they're corporate entities. So yeah, it's like this really fancy piracy.
Well, also look at the psychological implications of installing a police force in a town. What you're really doing is telling everyone, hey, don't be sovereign. Don't be careful. If anything happens, just call us. We'll come take care of whatever problems either you start yourself or you find yourself in for the 17th time in 6 months, right? It's an endless ticket, an endless buffet of anti-sovereignty, where if you had the opposite situation, where there was not a police force that worked that way, where you had this bounty system that was enacted instead, and that bounty was just as liable for anything they did as anyone else in the community that was given a bounty to, hey, tow truck, I need you to come take this car because he didn't pay his bill. We should have the exact same approach to it, but we can't because we want to have this cuckold ball-sucking relationship with these people. And I know that we want to say that's how we praise them, but I'm making the argument as strong as I can, and I get fought back on it all the time, that this is actually treating them worse, not better, by this Liberace bullshit that they get right now.
Yeah, in a way, we're glorifying the uniform, and we're telling them, no, you need to be more flamboyant, right?
Yeah.
You need a giant boa and these huge glasses and a big mink coat and slippers made out of golden thread.
And a toothpick, right? Yeah, it's
right. It's Elton John. It's Liberace. It's this idea that we should be regulating, when you were talking earlier, it sounded like almost like term limits.
Yeah, I think terms
if you're
and
going to have that system.
Yeah, and I would even argue for jurisdiction too. I don't mean to dominate this conversation, guys, but I would argue for jurisdiction too. What I mean is that when I grew up, I don't know how this is across the country, but you were not allowed to be a cop in your hometown, in your home district. And the reasoning is because, well, you might show favoritism. And that would be like the perfect proof of my entire fucking point, which is that if you know that they will show favoritism, why the fuck are we making them cops by doing that? What if we switched it? What if we said that you could only be a cop in the place that you lived? What if we said that not only could you only be a cop in the place we live, but that you were just as liable as anyone else with any other job doing any other thing for a living, that you had to maintain a sense of autonomy, sovereignty, and survivability to even make it by running these bounty programs for justice that people are constantly begging you to do, which is very unique in nature. We don't have there's not a contract where the Scarlet Tanager calls in the fucking Blue Jays because he's had a bad day. But there doesn't seem to be that much of a problem in the bird world. We're not overrun with certain birds because they're bigger or because they're more aggressive. We see a symbiosis that naturally develops. Why? Because we made everyone responsible for themselves. We made everyone exist inside this system of natural law. And the only people that objected to it were man-bear pigs that didn't want to exist in natural law, that wanted to create a hypothetical society where everything is fine and nothing bad will ever happen. And we've had cops for hundreds of years. Has that worked? Is that really, are we going to tell ourselves that the reason why we are civilized, which we are not, is because of the cops that we've had? Because I don't think that's actually the case at all. You look at Egypt, holy shit. Looking at the bureaucratic mess of Egypt, realizing that this entire system came about precisely because people started saying, well, someone ought to make a law, and someone ought to be in charge, and someone ought to do something. And you compound that decade after decade after decade, and you end up with this conglomerate state where we're committing international terrorism, we're murdering people across the seas for creating the largest water project in the world, and we're telling everyone the whole time, hey man, we're cops, right? We're cops. This is what we do. I mean, of course, in this case, they're soldiers, but it's the exact same justification. It's the exact same mentality that makes it prosper.
I mean, one of the one of the most watched and longest running shows on television was Cops. I mean, people loved watching cops just rob people. And I mean, it was really like, it was Pirates of the Caribbean. And you watched I remember watching a couple episodes, and I could never get into that, you know, like cops kicking people's heads in on, and like just the brutality. I was completely, well, I have my own relationship with cops because my mom married a cop. So I had, you know, a stepdad that was a cop, and he beat the shit out of my mom and had like an affair. And, you know, he was he could be a really nasty dude. So, you know, that
Well,
was
I
like
can't
my
imagine.
first experience with a cop.
Well, I can't imagine why anyone with a tendency or propensity for violence would even consider policing, Eric. Are you sure this is accurate, what you're telling me? Why would someone who seeks to elicit violence in others go into the police force? That makes no sense to me at all. Being sarcastic here, of course. But do you see it's the biggest magnet in the world, right? It's like, hey, not only is this food court full of the best food you will ever have, but it's fucking free. It is free. Come and get it. And that's society right now. I am not suggesting that we do away with all police forces, although I think it'd be a great experiment in certain bioregions. I definitely do. I'm suggesting that we change our relationship to anyone that we're putting in a uniform like that and treat them like a victim because they're being smeared and anointed in this paste of immorality, and it's never, ever, ever coming off their skin. And the 3 years or the 4 years that we allow them to do that needs to have something that comes with it for the rest of their life that marks them as someone who's been through this kind of broken psychology that was given to them. It was like a eunuch almost. It was except for it's like it's like a eunuch. And therefore, the rest of their life, they are going to have this immunity from it, which would would have this impotence from it, which would turn these police officers more into someone that's not physically into doing violence, but is more about physically into service and sacrifice for their community itself. So it becomes a different relationship altogether.
Yeah, I mean, if we can even pull back though and look, we're talking about society right now, but we're looking at the system that we have created through giving up power to total strangers. Like we have a fetish for offloading our responsibility to complete strangers in uniforms and these almost dehumanized like teller windows and tall buildings. Like we're so separated from everything, like the medical industry. And we talked last night about hospitals and just how that's completely set up to just dehumanize you and poison you from, you know, beginning to end and the whole process. And the same way with cops, they're, you know, you really see it, they're being forced to, you know, do the things that they do to people. And yes, we can look at them as victims and say that, you know, in the way that soldiers come back, they have to go a lot of them have PTSD, and then there's this whole argument that they're not getting, nobody cares, they're not providing them with people that can help them or programs that are helpful. And I would imagine that some type of mandated system, you're only allowed to serve so much time with this kind of power and in this role, and then afterwards you have to go through like this process of talking and like really trying to understand what you just experienced and why you catch yourself before you slip into that character or whatever it is, like the badge itself, where you identify more as a cop than as just a human being.
Didn't every job have that? Just like deprogramming? I mean, it's like all of these jobs are harmful to our psyche in some way. I feel like even flipping burgers at McDonald's, you're still,
That's what I'm saying.
Still has its own kind of mark of Cain to it.
I don't
We've
know,
devised
because
a system
I don't know.
where
Cops are compulsory though. Like donut shop makers, that's not a compulsory business, right? All these other businesses are
Meaning
not.
what? Meaning they just like it's always there, going all the way back, or what do you mean by that?
That society has built into the foundation stones of it that cops have authority, immunity, monopoly on violence, and are basically have unlimited power.
Well, I mean, it's even truer mark of Cain, though, right? It's like this mark that you got for being violent that protects you from any who would bring violence against you.
I see the difference that it's because you're in charge of another person. Even in the military, you have to be an officer or you have to be like a sergeant to be in charge of other people. If you're a private, you're not in charge of other people ever.
Yeah, I get it. I'm not arguing either. I'm just kind of throwing out, just an esoteric slant on it.
Well, any police officer, even the most junior officer, is in charge of anyone they deal with in their business. That's a pretty big power, I think. And when I was in the Army, they force you to go through all these interviews, and like in California especially, they try to recruit you. And I noticed it was all the people that were super gung-ho that didn't find their spot or their outlet for their gung-ho-ness were the ones that were signing up to be correctional officers and police officers and sheriffs, because they were giving those jobs away. It just seemed to, I'm not saying they sought those people out. That's just, since I knew the people, I just noticed they were the ones who went for it. So if that means anything about some of the psychological profiling. But I guess my main point is that I think that's a powerful thing. Anytime you're in charge of another person, that deserves some scrutiny by society more than we give it generally.
Well, certainly I think that consciousness needs to change for these types of systems that we're kind of talking about would work better or be a better replacement for what we have, because what we have, not just with the police, but I think with every major system of society is set up in a way that it really does attract the right person for the job, in that, with police officers and politicians and positions that have power and authority associated with them, that is where you're going to get your sociopaths and the people that seek that out. And I think what James is describing, and it's a society that's completely different from that, where that aspect is minimized as much as possible. And instead of rewarding sociopathy, and the system runs on it, right? It's inverted from what it should be, or what would work better would be something that's designed to show compassion and understand that the people that would be doing these jobs, like a cop, that they would need a break from that. They couldn't do that for very long, and we would be having compassion for them by saying, like, I don't think these people should be allowed to do this for longer than this period of time. And then afterwards, we really need to make sure that, everything's okay, and that, they're not, there's some permanent scarring that happened, and like approaching it like that with compassion, as opposed to just having this fetish to give our power up to people that are like the worst possible people to give it to.
Well, we really need to start claiming our power and taking responsibility and all that stuff. And it's like they're muscles that you have to develop, It's like every time, I can think back to so many instances in which I was by some by some accident or whatever that happened. I ended up in the medical system, and my relationship changed with it completely over the years, to the point where now I won't go there. I won't go to the hospital. I'm pretty sure there's almost nothing that would make me do that at this point. But it was a slow progression of developing my belief, and the belief has a lot to do with it. And my sovereignty began to grow in that area. And it took a long time. But I was aware of it. I was aware of it, and I was aware of where it came from and where I wanted to go. And that was really helpful. So we all, if so you have to shift the balance. We have to start taking more responsibility, and little at a time, small steps, if you can't do it all at once. And I'm not saying there's never a reason for anybody to go to a hospital by any means. This is just my take on it at this point for myself.
I hear you, Debbie, but for me personally, I would probably go to a hospital if I had a broken bone, like a bad break, or like I lost a finger or something.
That's where it always goes, though. Sorry to interrupt, but I just had this conversation with a good friend. It always goes there. He's like, well, what if you break a bone? And I'm like, well, the last 3 times I broke a bone, I didn't go to the hospital. And so that's not good enough. And so then they always go to the femur. And it's like, well, what if you broke a femur? He literally said, what if you broke a femur? And I think James might even mention that. It's just, it's like, well, I don't know. And see, the thing is that, and they already know, I worked at this transmission shop, and I didn't like to go out for lunch. So I slept in this loft, and I fell through the loft while I was asleep, and a transmission fell on my head, and I just lucked out, and I just went home and just kind of checked myself out and everything like that. And even something like that just isn't good enough for somebody. It's like, I don't know what, and I call it the great step, which is kind of ironic with the James situation, because, it was just because of this science fiction book where this Piers Anthony book, where this guy thought he didn't have this magic in this land of magic. And then he finds out that his magic is that magic doesn't work against him, and he has to cross this great chasm, and it's his first time, where he's kind of aware of it, and he's going to put it to the test. He's like, well, theoretically, I shouldn't die if I try to jump across this canyon, and he accomplishes that. So I've always called it the great step, but I thought that was a little ironic that happened, because I fell out of 50 feet out of a tree once. And, but yeah, I didn't necessarily mean to steer it in that direction, but that was also on my mind too.
Yeah, it's
It's actually a really great direction to steer it, because like if you look at it as upside down and backwards, like even before, so say you break your femur and you have a compound fracture, even before you get in there, you have to show credentials that you're part of this system by showing like proof of insurance and whatnot. Like, can you afford this? So to be someone who's not part of it,
Well, yeah,
you
that was part of the conversation, you know, about insurance and
right.
and hypothetical situations, you know, that and just being in charge of your own health. And I don't know, it just I shouldn't be surprised, but just once somebody gets in the system, you know, if they believe that they were helped, they're just loyal to that system. You know, he got his appendix taken out, so he feels like, you know, that really saved his life, and so he's loyal to that system to the degree where he'll justify anything I throw at him will have some answer. So I'm just continually surprised at the ability for him to render what he needs to stay in that system. You know, I guess I'm just happen to have that conversation with him.
Well, I think the breaking bone thing, I think we make a lot of assumptions about that. I think it's kind of like the my roads thing. I really do. We really are pretending that our bodies were made, and if we break a bone, holy fuck, we have to invent a hospital and you have to go there. And that's not what happens. The hospital doesn't actually heal your broken arm, does it? It could set your arm, but so could anyone else. So could anyone with a wilderness or with a first responder. These are things that wouldn't it be great if people were learning that in school? Like, wouldn't it be awesome if when you graduated from high school, you were a first responder, you were CPR certified, you had full understanding of how finance works, of how the human body works, about how nutrition works, and you have none of that. Why? Because there's a hospital. And about justice, about self-defense, about self-sovereignty, why don't we have those? Because there's a police station. These things are taking things away from us. They're not giving us things. And we have this relationship with the cops as if they are an authority to us, when in fact cops are our children. And when you have this relationship, when you're a young, naive parent, you will love your child and call it flawless. And you will give it what it wants because it's asking, or because you think it wants it, or because you think it'll do better if you just feed it more. And you end up with this fat-ass, ridiculous excuse for something in some cases. And you end up giving it more sugar, giving it more fame, giving it more power because you want to make sure that it has enough. It's that same faulty relationship we have with children. And if you were operating at that really low 3 megahertz level of understanding where, hey, you're supposed to respect cops all the time, or you're wrong if you doubt cops, you're the same person that's telling everyone else that no, Billy didn't bully your son. No, Billy would never do that. Billy, stop destroying the dog. Stop beating the dog, Billy. Stop. Billy would never do that to your son. And frankly, I'm offended that you would suggest that. And so now you instantly want to go to Billy and start combing his hair, start anointing him like an Excalibur, where that freaking weird gold kid, you know, where the mother's like bathing him in milk. That's what we're doing to cops. And I'm simply telling ourselves, I want us to know that is police abuse. We are abusing those people by doing this. That they would actually respond better, just as any child would, by having limitations, by having this sense of discipline and this sense of sacrifice and understanding with what's going on. Pull that power away, it has no choice but to go back into the individual, where the next thing you know, you have this understanding of retribution, that you as someone who's been wronged have the avenue to pursue how you were wronged directly. And this is what scares us, and this is what people don't want to have control over. This is the hardest part about it. There are cultures in the world where if you do not right the injustice of your family, you are shamed for eternity. And at first, when you look at that, you think, oh, that's horrible, that's terrible. But that would be the holding of attention, holding of the flame of sovereignty inside that epigenetic family saying, this is your responsibility. This is something that you have to do. And by bequeathing it to someone else, all we're really doing is just opening up all these holes where we are now abandoning even our own sense of self-defense. That's not even a class. We're doing kickball, right? We're not doing self-defense. We're doing kickball. We're doing soccer. None of these things do we consider as digestible by our children that we put through school. And that's our fault. That's us disservicing them so we can fucking feel better and type on our screen or tell people that, well, you just need to respect the soldier more. Or, James, if you'd ever served, you'd understand more. And they have no idea my history. They just automatically assume, just like with Debbie. They'd probably say the same to you. Well, clearly you don't know what's happening at a hospital, Debbie, if you're that concerned about it. It's the exact same kind of mentality. There is a respect given through this paranoid critique that I'm suggesting that we need to have with our children, that we need to become this role model for them that is not, I want to be your friend. It's no, I'm your parent, right? We treat cops like they're our friends, like they are our big brother that basically can do whatever and they're strong and they have the authority. And if we can hide in their shadow, we'll be okay. And that's how we breed this insolence in ourselves and in everyone else.
I like what you said about, teaching children in school these things like setting a bone and maybe even like putting stitches in, these things that
right.
Most people, I mean, even myself, like thinking about what would it take for me to actually go to a hospital. And if I knew how to set a bone and I knew somebody else, like if Amanda learned also how to set a bone, so we're covered, like between the two of us, if somebody breaks a bone, I got you. I can put a splint on, I can set your bone and then just let your body do what it does. Yep. And it's like we get a gash, I can stitch you up. I like this idea and I'm definitely going to look into like learning some of these things because I think that's extremely important because I certainly don't want to go to a hospital ever. And if I can figure out ways to make sure that I have the skills or the knowledge necessary for the things that I would feel like I had to go to the hospital for, then man, that would increase my confidence so much.
Just make sure that people that are close to you know how you feel about all that stuff and get it in your will, your living will. All that stuff is good to have written down, I think. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But I definitely, that's one thing I was like, I'm never, ever going to go to the hospital. I'll just die at home and just, no ventilators. Thank you very much.
Yep.
And yeah, a bunch of stuff that I put in my will, and my daughter, who's like my only real next of kin, is like, really? She's like, okay, because she's the one that would probably be disseminating the information, But it was good that we went through it together. I think it helped her understand that I really meant these things that I was saying.
Yeah, I get to say that now too. I had an incident this week and got hurt real bad and could have easily gone to the hospital. The ambulance was on the way and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm hurt. I can't go to the hospital. I'll check you out when I'm well. I'll go to the hospital if I'm well, maybe. Just to say, well, what did you want? What magical thing would you have done? Tell me what magical thing you would have done to have fixed this, because I know for a fact I would have gotten 0 physical therapy in the hospital. I know for a fact that they would have denied me the right to physical therapy in the hospital. When I say the right, I mean if I tried, I've been making myself, not making, it's very boring laying on your back all day, but like every 90 minutes, I have this notion or this desire to say, can you get up? Can you stand up right now? Can you take a step? Can you put your feet on the floor? Things like that. And that none of those abilities would have been given to me at a hospital. They would have been taken away. So even this illusion we have that, well, what if you broke a bone? The answer is, yeah. What if you broke a bone? You are not going to have therapy in that place. That would be the last place. After you leave the hospital, what happens? Then you get to seek a physical therapist. Then you get to do whatever you want to do to heal. It's only until you've been released from the clutches of that beast that you get to see the same thing. And I would argue that the police department is the same way. Your sense of justice is your sense of sovereignty, and you lose both when you get down on your knees and say, help me, I broke a bone. What do I do? What do I do? And on top of that, I want people to know that I get that we've been weaned on this for a while. So we can't just snap our fingers and take this off. I think you're going to see slowly people like Debbie, like myself, like many of us on this panel, slowly emerging from this ignorance, very much like a parent who raised that golden child and finally saw little Billy beating the shit out of a kid after school one day. And it took until he was in 12th grade, and the next thing you know, that parent's finally like, holy shit, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe this is the wrong approach. These kinds of things are only going to be understandable by going through this vitriol and having these lessons, which is terribly unfortunate. But that's kind of the dojo world that we're living in, isn't it?
And when you make
Yeah.
these decisions that increase your sovereignty a little at a time or all at once, it seemed like, James, you had a real big one there,
Yeah.
big dilation. And I had one of those too. And it just cracked my world wide open after I didn't seek help. When I mentioned that I had pneumonia and I couldn't stand up. I was so sick. I've never been like that in my life. And I just said no to becoming worse. I don't know how that happened, how it worked. But after that, my relationship to seeking help was entirely different. And it was just profound experience.
Yeah. Yeah, these are emergents, and not everyone's going to be able to do it, especially if they've been raised like veal, right? Their entire life, where they're graduating. What are you, 17, 18 when you graduate? I guess you're like 17 when you graduate high school. And look how much you don't know, right? Look how much you can't even like leave school when you want, right? You have this complete, total relationship with someone else dictating what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it. And now all of a sudden you're free. It's completely obvious to me why college was invented, because we suddenly notice that we're surrounded by long children, right? These 17-year-old babies that are walking around. It's like, well, what do we do now? Well, what's going on now? And so college becomes the only thing you can do with them. You're waiting for them to bloom, and the way you're going to bloom them is by giving them a pacifier with sugar for 4 more years and make them pay for it, which, by the way, is good vitriol. I kind of love how the brutality of student loans, because when I look at how people are going to learn about this system, I think student loans, and I'm like, okay, that helps, because at least you're going, into that and making that mistake as brutally as you can. And the system itself is even saying, student loans are never forgivable. And one day, people are going to go, why the fuck would I go there? Why the world would I do there? And they would look for an alternative. They would look for some sort of different kind of way of getting the tools that they needed to emerge as a sovereign person. They'd look for a campground. They ran for 9 weeks. I'm just kidding. But they would look for systems like that, because they would know that this is what I need in order to survive in this world. This is why I have this vision of this campground system, because I think that in 9 weeks you can not only deprogram, but you can install these just basic skills and these basic boilerplates, which end up turning these veal into bulls again. And nothing else in society is designed to do that. Nothing else has been tailored to do that, because we've been so insistent that we have to keep cuckolding our children instead. And that's why it works the way it does right now.
Yeah,
I
yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
yeah, I have like a weird relationship with disease, illness, pain, and like after the dojo, I was reflecting back, and I just started like thinking about why do I have this kind of weird thought process or relationship to these things, and I found that it's deeply rooted in my childhood, and my mother was a nurse her entire life until she died of brain cancer of all things, and my dad was like a hypochondriac and always thought he had some ailment or disease. And like I went back and I was looking through all of these memories of times when I I felt like I was sick or something was wrong with me, and just, oh man, it was like a mind fuck, really, just to see how much I had been programmed just by my parents without them even realizing what they were doing. And I can see why there's like so much work for me to do to try to root these things out and change my relationship, my perspective on how I'm looking at them. But I will say that after the dojo, like after doing that, I couldn't even fall asleep. I was just thinking back through all of these memories and trying to unpack some of this stuff. But I woke up feeling just so much better than I felt in a long time. And just I wanted to go running. I haven't been running in a long time. I just didn't feel like I could physically get out there and start running, but I did. And I don't know, this whole idea of changing the way you look at pain, the way you look at fear, I think it's just profound. And I'm trying to work through this stuff, and so that's why I enjoy these conversations. Like James, I feel like you have a lot to to teach people, but you're living it, you're doing it right now.
Yeah, and it's it's not going to be a popular belief, because as soon as people start to unravel what I'm saying, they're kind of like, "Oh fuck, I have to do this? I don't want to do this. Can I just whine and just tell people how wrong you are and just call 911?" Even the 9/11 ritual. This is why I'm so insistent that Building 7 was a good thing. It was a spark of guys wake up. They even branded 911. That was like the most perfect spell, because they were telling you the people that you think you can call when you need help are the very people that are eating your fucking children right now every single day. And I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for that because I see what the society does to itself when it lacks the courage to take that step and just have that relationship with nature, right? That completely sovereign relationship with nature. This is the Aquarian age. And regardless of who fights me on this, these things will be happening anyway. This is the necessary evolution of us, I think, as a species, is becoming these sovereign individuals. And with those, we will finally shed all this bullshit and start taking things into our own hands, much like a sailor would that takes a vessel across the Atlantic. Much like I did when I was young. I didn't do it on purpose, but I went out camping and I wanted to try camping solo. So I went to Savage Gulf in Tennessee. It's like the Grand Canyon of the East Coast, and camped there. And of course, being young, I didn't look at the weather at all. Thank God. My white belt was serving me well. And I walked into the worst thunder and lightning storm I've ever been in my life. Giant trees were falling like feet from my tent. My entire tent was full of 5 inches of water. It knocked over my stove as I was making black beans. It came out of the sky so fast, the stove caught on fire. So now I had a fire burning my campground, and I was completely soaked, and I spent the entire night inside my tent like a little bitch. with my knees curled up to my chest, standing on my feet because you couldn't lay down because there was about 3 inches of water, wondering if a tree was going to land on me. And in the morning, I was a fucking man. In the morning, I was a completely different being. I had so much that changed because of that experience. And I've developed a habit, an appetite for those experiences. And I think that it would be quite natural for anyone else to have an appetite for those things, but it will only happen if we create opportunities where people can go through these rituals. And this isn't even a new idea, is it? This is the Vision Quest. I'm not even trying to preach something crazy and outrageous. No, I'm saying, why don't we fucking go back to how it was?
Go back to it.
Right? When we were living on the plains, when we were colonizing, when we were like, holy fuck, what is that? It's an Indian. Holy shit, holy shit. What are we going to do? Let's see if we can trade with him. Let's try and friend him. I don't know what to do. Fuck, what do we do? And then all of a sudden, you are fucking awake now. You're awake. You realize that you're living in nature. You're not living in a fort. And you suddenly immerse yourself in it, right? My mom, I love her dearly. She abandoned me to school. She abandoned my first aid training. She abandoned my vision questing. She abandoned all of those things that I would have needed to survive because she thought that it was the right thing to do to bequeath that responsibility to the government. And that's what we do with school. That's what we do with medicine. It's what we do with military. And it's what we do with law enforcement. And that's why we are what we are. And more importantly, it's why we are terrorizing the entire world right now, because we've been brought up in this same system that breeds this same kind of thinking.
Well, not coincidentally, a lot of esoteric practices or magical practices, especially with self-initiation, a lot of the initiation process, there's an early stage where you are well, not really required, but you know, if you're approaching this something you want to do, there's a period where you spend out by yourself in the woods, in nature, usually 90 days or longer, right? Some people can do like 6 months, but it's in my mind too. A couple of years ago, I really wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail from start to finish, and I wanted to take a leave of absence, and I wanted to just go and do that and spend, like 6 months on this trail, because I felt it was going to change me the way you're describing.
Yep.
And so I think those experiences are extremely valuable. And when it comes to becoming like a magician, going through that process is what gets you ready to go further and do these other things, because you have to really find that sovereignty within yourself, and you have to have that change take place.
Yep. And it needs to be alone, doesn't it? It can't be a spectator sport. We can't be watching him. Oh, look, he's scared. It's raining. It's thundering out. Yeah, it would never work that way. It only worked because I knew I was too far away to walk back to my fucking car. That was the only reason why it worked for me. And I'll tell you, that wasn't the only experience. That I've been wanting to hike the AT too. I've hiked from Georgia through Tennessee and North Carolina. I haven't quite made it out of North Carolina yet. I haven't done it in one setting because, again, you have to plan for that. You have to change your life to be able to do that kind of a thing. But I know what those experiences have done. Hiking up Blood Mountain in Georgia, I had a horrible case of hypothermia, and I was so far away from everyone that all of a sudden I was alone, and I was having some mental clarity issues because of it was the middle of summer, but I was wearing cotton, sweating my ass off. I was trying to accomplish or finish a goal instead of being in flow state. And the next thing I knew, at like noon, I ended up crawling into my tent with no poles, just using it as like a security blanket, and just freezing and shivering for a couple of hours, and really, really scared out of my fucking mind. Like, what have I gotten myself into? What have I done to myself here? Now, I was able to find help. I was able to heard a pickup truck, and I started running as fast as I could down the hill towards this sound of this pickup truck. And I met these guys right at this intersection, and they were just like, "Oh my God, who the fuck are you?" Because how weird I looked, and I was just like, "I have to have water. I have to have water." And they drove me to their house, and like a fucking dog, I just sat there with their garden hose. I didn't even go inside. I just sat there with their garden hose in my mouth, just learning the mistake I just made, right? Like processing, what the fuck did you just do to yourself, James? What the hell did you just do to yourself? And it was because I had my guard down, and I could certainly critique myself, but by God, I've been raised for 17 years to have my guard down. It's going to take a lot of things like this for me to get that, because I didn't start young. So I'm not even suggesting that everyone has to have this big, huge, dramatic event where they almost lose their life. I think that would not happen if we were starting these things earlier, because we'd be already in tune with that by the time we're 13 or 14, right? When you're choosing your own name, that's because you're having that experience. You're accomplishing that sovereignty by going through these events.
That is very true. Like, I remember when I was in my teenage years and then into my 20s, I had a lot more experiences that I was not prepared for, that were dilating because I was not prepared for them. And now I would never put myself in those positions, because I'd already have like anticipated all the things that I might be afraid of. And, either I wouldn't do the thing that I was going to do, or I would, just try to minimize the risk, but what happens is, as you get older and you don't have more of these experiences, you get lazy, you get weak, you get, all the things that made us give our sovereignty away to begin with.
Well,
So it's like,
I continue to have experiences that, like not too long ago, it's not a traumatic thing, but it's the same type of mechanism. And I think you create your own field where, for various reasons, I had a strong desire to learn how to play violin. And then the more I learned, I realized I had this one finger that I couldn't arch. And I'm just not ever even going to have a chance of playing violin. It's like I was just ruining. It's like I didn't even remember what I did to that knuckle, but it just wouldn't bend. And then I let my living room get really messy, as I sometimes do, and I fell down in this most ridiculous, like clownish way that you just could never even, even if you believed in coincidence, you'd have a hard time believing that, and then twisted all around where the only way I could do was fall with all my weight on that finger, and I broke that knuckle, and I held on to it, and I was going, ugh, and then I was even thinking about that violin playing, and then I was just amazed. I was like, look, I was showing Lori, I was like, look, it straightened it out. And I fixed my finger, and then all of a sudden I was like able to play a scale, So there's an example right there. It doesn't have to be, and in this, I think part of it's kind of the timeliness in James' situation. It's like, I'd be way more in fear of going to a hospital like now than I had. I mean, I already was against it, and I would have not, but I think it's on a different level that compressed it to a whole nother level, so, but there's other levels too, like, like what I just described as something drawn out over time, but I think it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. And that was an easy one for me, maybe because of what I'd gone through before, but the easiest thing for me to do was to say, there's no fucking way I'm getting in that ambulance. Are you kidding me? I'm hurt. Why would I get in an ambulance when I'm hurt, So.
Yeah, it's scary. I'm very afraid of doctors and hospitals.
Well, it's already been on my mind, since people are like, and I had that conversation with that friend, and I'm just like, well, what would I do? It's like, there's, and then here's a situation, it's like, that's really putting things to a fine point on things, putting things to a test, and really sculpting some sovereignty there, I'd say, in this situation right here.
Well, Amanda and Eric will fix us because they're going to town. So.
Yeah, one of the great blessings of the COVID was, I think the last time I went to a hospital wasn't that long ago. It was actually 2019, early 2019, and I cut my finger pretty deep cooking dinner, and I took an Uber to the hospital, to the emergency room, and got in there. They just put some glue on it. They cleaned it out, which I could have done, and put some glue on it. And the doctor comes in for like 2 seconds. He came in a couple times, and all he wanted to do was just ask me about a tetanus shot. Right. He kept pushing this tetanus shot on me. And when I told him, I'm like, yeah, I already had it like a year ago. I'm good. And he just was like, oh, okay, great, perfect. And he walks out. But, the woman that was doing my finger, she wasn't much of a conversationalist. And I guess I had a realization after that. I'm like, I could have done this myself. I could have just put some rubber cement over it and just.
And that's a good experience. Like that's a controlled learning experience, right? Like instead of having to go out to the woods and blah, blah, blah. Not that you haven't been in the woods, Eric, but going to the hospital is that same kind of a thing. If you can look at what a hospital really is, look at how they're really treating you, you end up learning those same lessons, which is why I'm saying, that it still helps to have these things because they're slowly teaching us that we can't have these golden child relationships with people that are supposed to come in and magically save us whenever we need a road or justice or to be fixed or to be protected from all of our problems. Do you see, if you look at that, you find, wait a minute, there's a fetish there. All four of those things are pointing at the same fetish, which does not exist in nature. This concept of insurance and security, those two things do not exist in nature, right? We've created those out of the hypothetical. And because we don't want to embrace the fact that they're not there, we keep insisting that we have them and that they're here right now and that look how shiny these badges are. So it must be true. So it becomes this addiction with something very, very unnatural that turns us into these veal man-bear pigs.
Well, I've definitely have been skeptical of, the medical industry, doctors, hospitals for a while, but definitely in the last 2 years, I mean, the fact that I went to the emergency room for a cut, and now I wouldn't go to a hospital. I'd like to say for anything, right? I want to be there where I'm just, but yeah, I feel like there are just things I can do for myself, and watching Dancing Nurses and all of the shit that's gone on the last 2 years just really opened my eyes, especially the way I thought about viruses and all of this other stuff. It's like completely changed the way I look at that. And it just keeps going. Like I need to change the way I look at everything. Everything in Babylon. I mean, I'm always finding things going, wow, I never thought to look at it that way before. And the way you guys were talking about hospitals last night, I mean, I guess I hear it and I'm like, absolutely. But I hadn't really thought about it that way either.
Yeah. Now, you could have a very healthy relationship with a hospital because you yourself have decided, I want to get an x-ray of this, or I want to get a MRI. I want to look at this because this thing has concerned me enough, and me as my doctor has decided that we'd like more information. And we can go to this place and find more information that I may not be able to deliver myself. Once I have that information, I can leave that place. I can come back to my house. I can, and this is spiritual too. It's not like you have to physically get out if you're not moving, but you take it back to your house and you use that information to determine what you think is happening, right? You don't sit there and wait for someone to come in while your ass is hanging out of a gown to tell you what is happening. And that's the intrinsic relationship that we're slowly seeing change, and sadly is considered abusive from the hospital's eyes. The hospital sees anyone that is trying to maintain their sovereignty inside their bed as a problem. There's a problem in room 3. That trauma patient keeps trying to have sovereignty, right? We need to get a handle on that. We need to get a line in that, right? We need to stop that. And that's because we have this golden child relationship with it. Same with police, though. Not to say we have to bring it back to police, but you could actually turn that into a different kind of relationship. Imagine if cops were like this kung fu peacemaker that considered it their duty to take spiritual challenges as vitriol and to act accordingly in a way that dictates the most natural law for everyone involved. And at no point is that kung fu master ever been given a badge to do it. It simply becomes his walk of life, his method of moving through things. He would find that his relationship with how people respected him was directly congruent to his behavior on the street. He would develop certain relationships with people that found him to be a reputable person, and that those people would naturally develop a relationship with him too, because all of this was voluntary, and that at any moment that could be revoked. And the fact that all cops will go into a house and say, you have a house plant, I'm taking your car now. Your children no longer have a parent anymore because I found a house plant in your house. I don't know why we are pretending that we can trust cops when that keeps happening. I don't know, and I can prove it because I think that it would be so affronting to any cop that cops themselves would start to police other cops who were caught distributing this kind of houseplant justice on others, and that they would do that under the auspice of, you're making our job harder by going into people's homes and doing this kind of thing, right? That you were causing the problems by doing this. If you had this voluntary kung fu, I'm talking about the show Kung Fu, by the way, but if you had that voluntary system like that, you would find that people were competing, much like I compete now, for someone's reasoning about how they look at the world. I don't have authority over that. All I can do is keep coming up with better karate moves day after day after day, to where I can say something with such a calligraphy that people finally get it, and that they are moved individually to change their stance on something because of the display of what they saw, not because of the hypothetical golden child syndrome that we've installed before anyone got here.
Something that
I'd love to go ahead.
Yeah, Danny.
Yeah, I'd love to chime in here. All this definitely resonates, relates, and I guess I'll start with a memory I have. I want to say, let's see, third grade. I was with my older brothers. We were climbing a tree. They kind of climbed out onto this branch, and everyone kind of hung and dropped off. And I went to hang, and then I, looked down and I'm like, wow, I'm really high up. Had a lot of fear in that moment. No one helped me. I fell, twisted my ankle. Probably not a big deal. But at that time, I just remember being really curious. So the backstory to all this is that my mom specifically, but both my parents found the religion of Christian Science, and it's a religion that focuses on healing through prayer, would be a way to simplify it all. And so doctors were at that time, and really throughout my life, have been a pretty foreign thing, just something that I have not interacted with much. I have gotten glasses, and I don't even know what else. I had a chipped tooth, and I had a tooth capped, but that's pretty much it. And I haven't had I've had like a couple Advils, and that's kind of the extent of pharmaceuticals. I've done Adderall once to try that. Anyways, I wanted to share that story of, at that time, just really being curious as to what this doctor experience was, right? It was something that all my friends were well acquainted with, and just there was a curiosity there. And I guess kind of fast forward, my most recent injury where most people would have gone to a doctor was, I was out with some dogs, and I was walking in this creek, and I was going barefoot, which is something that I do a lot. It's, you know, I have tough feet, but walking in water softens your feet. And basically what happened, and this was kind of like a clay bottom, it was a really soft bottom creek, but there were gravel banks. And I'm trying to like think of what detail to share, but there was a moment I was with it was a younger dog new to the group, and it was I had let it off leash in this area that was well contained. The creek had kind of steep edges, but the dog, there was a storm rolling in, and so the dog was getting jittery, and so I wanted to get the dog back on leash, and so I had kind of wrangled him into against the bank and went to kind of pounce on him, but just get a hold of him. And in those few steps, my foot came down on a glass bottle, and I don't know if it was already broken or I broke it, but I got essentially the edge of a glass bottle at least a half inch into the bottom of my foot. And when it happened, I thought I had just hit like the edge of a rock, and I didn't even know if it just felt very numb, and kind of there was nerves that was cut. I mean, that was part of the numbness. There's kind of this whole healing process that I could go into where there wasn't a lot of pain at first, but it was as it was healing and as the nerves were reconnecting, there was a lot of pain that came later on. But so I cut my foot in the creek. I with a group of dogs, hobbled my way probably an eighth of a mile back to my truck. I had multiple dogs in this, stormy weather with a bleeding foot that I had wrapped. It was just kind of this whole long ordeal of getting the dogs home. I went to the first house and I chugged a bunch of water because I was bleeding pretty profusely. And I had enough, I don't know, something came over me to record it. So I have a video of me like bandaging this, wound on the bottom of my foot. And I got home and I just passed out and let it be. But there was a whole process of watching it heal. And I guess something that I have learned, and this was also from seeing Jordan, my wife, go through healing processes of having these big kind of gaping wounds where the body can heal without the stitches. And I do believe there's an advantage to closing that gap and getting that tissue connected. It can preserve tissue. It can facilitate a faster healing. But at the same time, if you have sealed it up and you're not allowing the fluids to flow, that flow is what keeps it clean, right? That's that sort of constant eliminating process. And so there is a balance there. But the path I took was no stitches and I used bandages, but just leaving it open to the air to really solidify that protective scab layer was key. But at the same time, because it was on the bottom of my foot and I have to use my feet to move around, it was a long healing because it kept breaking open. But yeah, with Jordan and myself, I've gotten to witness these kind of what you would call a gaping wound that most people can think that you need to stitch up, heal, and the blood just fills in that crater, and it kind of slowly from the bottom, the valley of that crater fills in and pushes out the scab material until it comes back level with the rest of the skin. Anyways, yeah, I definitely relate to this subject matter, and I definitely don't think I will be going to a hospital even for, I've definitely saying definitely a lot. I have imagined setting a bone. I've imagined being in that situation where I have to put my bones back together. I don't know. I'll get plaster of Paris. I'll get some wood. I don't know what I'll do, but I'm gonna do something. And maybe I'll have a friend that has expertise. You know, it's not like I'm closed off to that help, but I do try and tread that path of taking care of my own.
Do you think that
health.
those injuries are related, Danny? You've described two issues where you were injured on your feet, on your ankle, right, or on your foot itself. And those two instances have really made a ripple in your life.
The which two?
The tree, you were hanging from a tree, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
And you, in my opinion, the reason why you got hurt is because you weren't fully associated with the idea of dropping. You felt more like everyone else is doing it. I'm scared as fuck. I don't like this. I don't even know how I get down anyway. Oh, here I go. Fuck. And of course you're going to get hurt. Of course you are. And that same wound, because you were raised like veal, no one was able to hear you come to them and tell that story and to catch this, right? To catch the posture that you were in mentally and to draw it out on the board for you and to say, Danny, look at what you did. You abandoned yourself on that tree. You let the witness and association of others around you commandeer your pilot house. How do we fix that?
I think even at that age, it was probably more of just not being fully in my body yet, not having developed that association to self, I guess.
I would argue that you were more in your body, and then you grow out of it slowly as we enter into adolescence and as we're subjected to the abuses of being raised like veal. That it was a challenge, much like I had an incident on the high dive. I climbed up to the high dive and I couldn't do it. I was too scared. And it was the most humiliating climb down. I climbed down, the ladder was like 5 times more dangerous than just jumping. But the fact that I had that experience, it was so humiliating for me that it created this desire, this issue in me. I'm not saying you're humiliated. I'm saying that having that trauma created this endless drama in me to find an opportunity to go back to that high dive and fix it. But I couldn't go back then because I was too young to even know what was happening. So instead, I would find myself smelling opportunities like that, and non-consciously entering into a contract where I could find that magic again and see if I could alchemize it in some way. And so we end up repeating our injuries. Same way Pi had with his finger, right? I've injured my back in a very specific place, which is fascinating because a long time ago, I hurt my back in the exact same place. And I don't know if this is the case, but when I'm laying down in bed trying to heal, I am telling myself that this back is not actually injured, that this adjustment, I performed a self-chiropractic adjustment on me, just like Pi did on his finger, because I knew I was going to have more spine to move on to the next thing, right? But we don't have these opportunities because we don't really live in a society that cherishes those moments as crucial, right, to our advancement as individuals.
I want to share on that note of how the injury can be a beneficial thing. With the cut on my foot, it's on my left foot, and I've always had sort of a gimpy big toe on that foot, and it's been a combination of that side. Just for whatever reason, I was born that way, that there was kind of this little difference in the length of my toes, but also that I injured that toe. But after this cut, it's like there's so much, it's all new sensation in that area. And I'm able now to use and move that toe in a way that I wasn't able to before. And just another anecdote, oh gosh, blanking on names, but what's his name? So Mike Tyson punched Steve-O in the face at some award show, and Steve-O talks about how he had broken his nose so many times, but he got punched in the nose. It just totally broke it. And this guy he was like an experienced plastic surgeon, in that instant just like shaped his nose and put it all into place and like just leave it be. And it healed better than ever. So the point being that I think when we have these I don't know, traumas, impacts, this disruption, it does set the stage for healing and
for an opportunity.
And perhaps
yeah. I don't mean to butt in, but it's crucial to know that it's an opportunity, isn't it? It's not even necessarily something that's going to work. It's only going to work if we see it as an opportunity and we start to alchemize it. Otherwise, we're going to be able to process
give the right
it.
Feedback.
You know, like, look how much I was tortured, or look how much I was abused, right? That changes it entirely. And so it no longer becomes an opportunity for growth. It becomes a beautiful festering island of self-fulfilling disassociation, really. Because now we have this universal excuse of this or of that. I would argue that glasses are the same way. I had a dog eat my glasses, and they were military issued, and I just could not even fathom how I would pay going to an eye doctor to get new glasses, nor was I even willing to go back onto a military base and get my free eyewear. And I just went without them. And it never once occurred to me that I could just simply live with 54/20 vision, and that's how I see the world. It never occurred to me that my vision was wrong until someone told me it was wrong, until someone conveyed to me the idea that you are not seeing the world correctly. You need to see it the way I do, the way this person does, the way this chart does. And so you enter into this relationship where you're having to abandon your sovereignty, your vision itself, and to adjust to something else. I'm not saying that that would mean you should never do that. I'm saying that that kind of relationship is forming an agreement that someone else knows how I should see more than maybe my body has been telling me this whole time. Hey, man, I want you to be nearsighted, James. I want you to stop fucking looking so far away, you stupid fuck. You know, I want you to stay in the moment. And the only way I can get you to stay in the moment is we're going to blur the fuck out of anything that's further away. And if you really look at that constructively, in my mind, I'm like, that's probably what was keeping me alive because of how fucking clumsy I was in. I wouldn't get run over by a car. I would run into parked moving trucks, like the largest moving truck you could find. And I would be running across a parking lot, proclaiming that I was this creature, this show called Bigfoot and someone else. And I was this Tarzan-y figure, and I was running home to get something. And because I was so enthralled in this situation, I just ran smack into that truck, and it wasn't moving. I had a problem of not looking at what was right in front of me. And it could have been that right there in that moment, my body decided, hey, guys, anyone object to us just blurring the fuck out of anything this guy sees past 50 feet? And the guys had a meeting, and they're like, I like this idea. I think we're going to survive a lot longer if we install this. The same thing with toes. The same thing with fears. I think fears are a biggie too, you know? The fears that we end up having as we grow old are the very vital tools we need. These magical opportunities to alchemize these things by looking into these quote ailments as more of like important markers that were necessary for our growth.
I hadn't even thought about it till just now. I mean, Danny mentioned his foot, and I was thinking about, it was probably back in like 2016 maybe. And I was going hiking quite a bit, but I was at that time when I was hiking, you know, I was being very careful, and I was wearing like hiking boots, and we went on a pretty grueling hike, and I ended up fracturing a bone in my foot. And I mean, for months, it was like really difficult to walk on it. It would swell. I'd sleep with it propped up and like put ice on it. But I never once even thought to go to a hospital. And I just kind of dealt with it. I didn't even really freak out about it. I just knew that I didn't even know it was a fracture, but I just deduced that that's what it was, and that I diagnosed myself. And I told myself what it was, and that fractures, especially like hairline fractures, they could heal fairly quickly on their own. I just need to like stay off of it and do these things. And then after it finally healed and I could like walk normal on my foot, I just couldn't wait to get out and go hiking again. And I remember I went on this really like a 30-mile hike, and towards the end of it, I hit these rocks, and I'd never really done trail running before, but I was like running these trails and like just leaping onto rocks and not even thinking about, where my foot's going to go, just being in a flow state. And so like the injury itself, I feel like it, not only did it make my foot stronger, but it built my belief in myself and made me want to push myself that much more.
Right.
And, I've was given glasses when I was a kid, and I never wanted to wear them. I hated glasses, even in the military. They made them so ugly anyway that I didn't even want to put those things on. They called them birth control glasses.
That's right. I had the same pair. I loved them because of how ugly they were. And I was really bummed when the dog ate them, because when you're back in civilization, people were like, where the fuck did you get those glasses?
Yeah, they become a novelty, right?
Yeah, they definitely were. It became a thing that, like, I was put in the chat, but like because of my vision, I have no business driving at night. And so guess what? I don't. And you could say that limits my life, but if anything, I think it gives my life focus, right? Like it specifies what kind of flow state I find myself in. That at dawn, I'm more into traveling. I'm more into moving when I can see things all the time. And this feeling of wanting to see better at night, it's actually more the other lights that really make me blind. And that even if I could see those lights, it's maybe not necessarily even something that I should be engaging in. It doesn't actually stop me from living. It simply changes the way my life comes out of myself, which could be vital to my survival and my success, is by focusing in on what would be your natural recipes that would come out of you based on your toe, Danny, right? Or based on your fingers, Pi, or based on my stuff, all those things. That these relationships we have are no longer random, accidental things that are fucked up about your body. They become these, the shape of the bow itself that plays the violin that is you, right? And that bow is shaped a certain way. The F holes are in a certain place because this is what makes your sound so resonant, so you versus someone else.
Something I've noticed about myself is that since I've really started doing a lot of this inner work on myself, dealing with memories and, just really kind of picking apart all of the things that I do, the way I think about things and looking at them, I have had all of these crazy aches and pains in different places in my body that they recur, right? But they'll go away, and then something else will happen, and then that'll go away, and then I'll have periods where I feel fine, but then there's always something that comes back. And I've started to notice that it's always in relation to when I'm starting to deal with certain aspects of myself, and like emotions come up, and I'm experiencing those emotions in my daily life. Things are testing me, and so I've noticed that there's a correlation with these, and I've started to look at the aches and pains not as signs that there's something wrong with me, but that this is just my body's way of letting me know that I'm working on something, or I need to focus more on something. And like, it's not about where the location of the pain is telling me something, but it's not about something going on in my actual body. It's like I don't know, a way of looking at these things is more of like an emotional or spiritual kind of thing, that it's me tapping into myself and guiding myself.
We should ask ourselves, are we really broken? Are we actually broken? And I'm not saying no one should wear glasses. No one should do anything to correct anything that they have. I'm saying that if we change our relationship to those things, it could be that we're going to miss something really valuable that's been waiting for us that whole time.
So I've had a maybe what you'd call an epiphany. It's something that is simple, and it's kind of like I don't know. It might not seem profound, but for some reason lately it's just hit me deep, and that's this notion that healing is our default, that homeostasis is our default, that in every environmental context we are in that constant mode of adaptation, and it's really through our own feedback, perhaps inadvertently, that we suppress or inhibit that natural process. And I feel like when you see it in that light, and then you see, the inversion of Babylon, it's almost, it's amusing in this sense of like like I think of it in the context of someone like Jesus, who, it's talked about like casting out demons, but if in this light, it's like it's just showing people the truth of who they are, and their natural expression, that they are health, they are the living essence, life, and it's a product of their memory, their beliefs, that perhaps is inhibiting them from connecting to that self-knowing, something like that. But just, I don't know. Yeah.
That's such a much nicer way of thinking about healing and health and well-being, Danny. Definitely.
Yeah, and that'd be taken away if we were waiting for a hospital, right?
Yeah, and every time I find myself going in the hospital direction, I try to redirect myself towards something like what you said, Danny. There's different ways of saying it. That was beautiful. I have a lot of different ways of doing it for myself at different times. But just, catching yourself in that moment where you feel like you're drifting over to being broken. I mean, I have had a lot of injuries to my hands, both of them now, because the most recent thing I did was break my left wrist. When I was a child, I cut my right hand very badly on a glass jar, falling on it. And I was, oh God, I was probably about 8. I was just learning to write cursive, which they taught in those days. And I remember having to switch hands. So I switched to being a lefty at that time. And then just for some reason, I was like doing some silly move in my house, like sliding across the floor in my socks because I thought it would be fun or whatever. And I slipped and I broke my left wrist. And I never did get surgery or anything like that. So I have like a bent wrist. So both hands are really compromised, and I drop things a lot. And I find myself thinking like, oh, if you hadn't have done this to your hands, you could do so much more, blah, 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 all that stuff. So this is a good conversation for me to hear, because my hands hurt a lot, and I do avoid doing things because of the pain, So I'd like to work on that. I'm saying it right now, that I'm going to be more aware of that.
Nice.
I can share just another anecdote that relates to, I guess, specifically to broken bones. And there's a great book called Body Electric that gets into this kind of stuff. But basically, the bones are made of a calcium material that would have a piezoelectric quality. Piezo meaning force, and that an electric potential occurs when a force is pressed on it. So this is quartz, and there's a lot of different quartzes like that. A lot of different materials have that quality, and it's like going in a dark room and chomping on a lifesaver candy, and you see the sparks in your mouth. And so with our bones, they have this piezoelectric quality, and it's been demonstrated that there will be growth dependent upon the compression of that bone or the breakage, or it's obviously all the factors combined. But roughly speaking, you know, let's say your leg bone has an axis, and that axis is, you know, relative to how you're standing, how you're moving, how you're putting your weight. It's relative to a feedback that you're giving it between the earth and your mass. And so if there's a curvature in that bone, and there's a compression on one side, the bone will actually build material, add material on the side where there's a compressed force. And this could be, maybe you would call it negative charge versus positive would be the other side. I don't think it really matters in my mind, but just to know that one side would be building material, the other side would be breaking down and being I don't know, disassembled, so to speak. And also, just one more thing to throw in too is that when we have these injuries, the blood that goes into that space, that blood itself has this sort of stem cell property where it is actually laying the scaffolding to form that new bone material or any material that needs to be filled into that space. Just it's like, this is, in my mind, the real stuff touching on this notion that healing is our default. The body is way more intelligent than anyone in a lab coat, and it knows what to do, but we can definitely aid that process.
Yeah, it seems like it really needs time and witness to be effective. And when we go to a hospital, it's like the opposite of that, you know?
You get numbed.
You don't want to witness it. You want to numb it out. You want to ignore it, push it. Yeah. And so, of course, it's got to find a way to get your attention. This is, I guess, the root of disease it's this chronic suppression of the body's expression of healing. And so in order to get the witness it needs, it's got to manifest somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And people start just having all kinds of shit happen to them. Because the more you ignore it and the more you stifle it with toxins and poisons, it's going to have to find a way.
So there's this not chiropractor. He's a PT, physical therapist. His name is Tommy John. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him, but Tom Cowan interviewed him. And it was quite amazing. He really deals with the veal issue, you could say. He said most of our problems, and he's worked with a lot of people. He's in great shape himself. He's worked with a lot of athletes and people that really are on the cutting edge of keeping their bodies together and improving them. And so, but he works with injuries a lot. And what he learned, and he and his group, his team, whatever, that you want to go really hard at the injury. Yeah. And he found that by doing that, you ended up stronger than when you started and more agile than when you started. So he has a series of, I don't know, there's 4 different exercises. One of them I started to do just because I like to try to keep my lower body strong because of my hands, and you're just on the balls of your feet and you're just bouncing up and down, and you do it for 5 minutes. And you'd be surprised how, for different people, it would be different. For me, being a dancer, it wasn't that hard to do it, but I feel it after 5 minutes, definitely. You're just bouncing on the balls of your feet and trying to keep your heels up, and you try to keep your posture. And he has a number of different exercises like that. You just 5 minutes each. And they're to tell your body that it needs to get stronger. It needs to, giving that message instead of that opposite message of somebody else is going to take care of you. You're weak, right. You're not the whole sovereignty, the whole handing the thing off. Yep. So yeah, so it's pretty cool, James. You might want to check into that at some point later on when you're ready. Well, not right now, of course.
Well,
Yeah.
even right now,
Or
Debbie,
maybe.
well, even
Yeah.
right now, I am not able to do this show in my normal posture. My normal posture is relaxed in the chair. And when I was first talking, I was like having these like spurts of like massive pain. And the only way I can fix it is I'm in emperor's pose, which is a pose where your hands are resting on your knees, but your back is completely erect.
Mhm.
It's the only way I can maintain my focus and not hurt. And as we're talking, I've been sitting here going, holy shit, James, holy shit. What if the only way you can ever go through life now is with perfect posture? What if that is the intrinsic result of what is happening here? Just as
Mhm.
Danny was describing with that effect, which is absolutely true, one of the biggest conductors of physioelectricity is the bones themselves. And to know now that the only way that I can even stomach having a conversation right now is with perfect posture is really like this giant kiss from God herself saying, do it, right? Be better. Find that posture and keep it all the time. It will change everything about what you're about to experience from now on.
And posture is such a like a cool thing in that it's like lengthen your back.
Yeah.
Don't like, it's not like don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. It's like lengthen your back. And that means, I don't know, that's how I started phrasing it in dance class. And it works better than anything.
Yeah.
Just lengthen and
Well,
widen your back.
with the lengthening, I'm a big advocate of hanging and not even doing pull-ups, just
Right.
hanging from a pull-up bar. And it everything, all your backbones kind of separate out. If you can really build that length of how long you can hang and just relax in that position, I find that helps my posture. And I wanted to say also, with the notion of going hard at the injury, I feel like it's more about just feeling that process and moving in a way that's balanced, right? You're trying to give this balanced feedback to your body. Like, how do I need to move? How do I need to hang? How do I need to stand? How do I need to do whatever I need to do? And just all of that combined is what is guiding that process of decomposition and recomposition, right? Because initially the injury is like, let's hold this together. It might be this very chaotic scaffolding, like scar tissue you might think of, just to secure that space. And then once it's secured, there's this whole process of movement and exercise that will slowly redefine that tissue in a way that is in harmony with everything else. Basically restore it to its natural state relative to your movement, right? If you're not moving, it's just going to stay the way it is and be scar tissue. So.
Well, I definitely feel like I need to at least change my relationship with my body and just know that my body knows what it needs, and it knows what it needs me to do. And I just need to listen to it better. I just need to give it my full witness and not try to rely on things I've been told, things I've been taught to believe. That if I trust my body, myself, more than I trust anything else, I'm cultivating that relationship. I'm building trust. We got about 1 minute left, so I think we're going to leave it there. This was a really great discussion tonight, guys. I want to thank everybody for being here. If you want to just unmute and say goodbye, and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, thanks for the great topic. Great topic.
Yeah, really
this
good
is
being here.
Excellent.
Thanks for all the
Good
birthday.
stuff.
Happy birthday,
Pi.
Pi.
Birthday,
Really-
Pi.
Really
Happy
glad you're
birthday,
born.
Pi.
Yeah, really glad you're born, Pi. Thanks for being here.
You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift to gab and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. But I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I got way too many missed calls. Think your girlfriend going through her withdrawals. I do what I wanna, God gave me big balls. And some hoes that wanna cover them with lip gloss. Seen them looking at me crazy, but I ain't go. Hood nigga, ain't too many places I can't go. Tryna fit all of your friends in that Durango. I'm the only young nigga with a Kango. Chain glow, hang low, scaring Anglos. In Chapala trading dollars for the pesos. Mama smell the marijuana on my pesos. About to kill them in my nigga where they make those. Case closed, change clothes and time zones. She shook her neck and mind blown. Got the funky shit that make them do the stank face. I ain't chasing hoes, nigga, I'm at Chase Bank. Hey, you in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. You in her DM, I'm in her mouth, we not the same. Flipping the funk, the heat, the fire, got the flame. Came with the gift, the gab, and blessed with lots of game. Niggas be mad at me, they know I'm not to blame. But I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out. I'm too geeky to be preaching, I just show out. Winning and it's looking like a blowout. Pile up my paper, let it grow out. If it ain't about no money, I don't go out.